Further ado, I am delighted to introduce Bonnie Tsui tonight to discuss why we swim with us. Bonnie lives, swims, and surfs in the Bay Area, and she's a longtime contributor of the New York Times and California Sunday Magazine. She's been the recipient of a Jane Rainey Opal Young Alumna Award from Harvard University, the Lowell Thomas Gold Award, and a National Press Foundation Fellowship. Her last book, America Chinatown, A People's History of Five Neighborhoods, won the Asian Pacific American Award for Literature and was a San Francisco Chronicle bestseller and Best of 2009 Notable Bay Area Book Selection. And I'm going to ask Bonnie to come up on screen. Hi, Bonnie. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So now joining Bonnie in conversation tonight is Rick Koster, who is our champion for Read of the Day on the Day's side. Now, Rick has been an arts and culture writer at the Day for over 20 years, and he specializes in covering music, books, dining, and writes a weekly humor column known as Rick's List. His pieces have appeared in Dallas Observer, Houston Press, Offbeat, and The American Way. Now, last month for Read of the Day, we talked a little bit about the books Rick has authored, but today I'm going to talk about his pandemic hair and let you all know that Rick's going to be getting a live pandemic haircut at the Guard very, very soon. So, keep your eye out for that. All right. So before I let Rick and Bonnie get into it, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Why We Swim, and then they'll take it away more. So Why We Swim is an immersive, unforgettable, and eye-open perspective on swimming and on human behavior itself. Carl Zimmer, author of She Has Her Mother's Laugh, says of the book, Why We Swim is a gorgeous hybrid of a book. Bonnie Tsui combines fascinating reporting about some of the world's most remarkable swimmers with delightful meditations about what it means for us naked apes to leap into the water for no apparent reason. You won't regret diving in. And I couldn't agree more. This is a perennial staff pick at our bookstores. So Bonnie and Rick are going to talk for about 30 minutes, and then we'll open it up to your questions, which have been submitted through that Q&A module. All right, I will let you two take it away.
Thanks, Anastasia.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anastasia, and hello again, Bonnie. It is so nice to talk to you face to face, as it were.
Absolutely, same.
And I say that for those of Bonnie and I spoke on the phone last week for quite a while, so I could write the article that came out in advance of this talk. And I guess following up very briefly on Anastasia's kind introduction, it had to be, I apologize that you had to turn on your video and see this apparition with this hair, but if you'd done it next week, it would all be gone. So that's good. But anyway, Why We Swim. I love this book, just like Anastasia said. And I think now that I have spoken with you, I know you to be very humble and very self-effacing in spite of your accomplishments. But I think it takes a great deal of faith and self-awareness in oneself to start a book where within the first 3 paragraphs, you introduce a major character whose name is, and I cannot even begin to pronounce it. That is, can you tell us how to pronounce this guy's name?
It's Goodliger Thorson. And it's not like I had to, well, now I have to say it over and over again, but when I wrote the book, it wasn't like I had to say it out loud for a while.
That's true. But you did have to find all of those symbols in the Icelandic language or whatever they are. I don't know. But anyway, you could have put him in chapter 2 and started off with Michael Phelps or something, right. But good for you.
I'm gonna go for it.
Go for it. And I want to start with him because it is an amazing way to introduce everything about this book that I think is wonderful because it addresses several themes over the course of the narrative, all of which are eminently readable. And I told you this reads like a novel. So if you say, well, one of them is about the physiology of swimming, you know, the person in me that flunked biology in the 9th grade goes, I don't want to read about that. But it's very readable and fascinating. Anyway, this Icelandic gentleman seems to, across the board, epitomize all of the themes that you sort of end up tackling. And briefly tell readers or viewers what he did that originally attracted you to his story?
Sure. I opened Why We Swim with the story that about Gudliger Thorson. It's a story that my husband told me one night over dinner. And he works in fisheries and oceans and the environment. And I think an Icelandic colleague had told him this story, which is, back in 1984, it was the dead of winter, and this fishing vessel capsized off the coast of Iceland. And Gudliger Thorson was a young man at the time. I think he was about 22 years old. He was the boat's mate, and he was, on the fishing boat with his friends. The boat capsized, and he was the only one who survived. And he ended up swimming 6 hours, 6 kilometers in 41-degree water in freezing, air conditions, back to his home island. He followed the lighthouse of this. There's an island, a very small island called Heimei, which is off the larger main island of Iceland. And he's from a very small town on a very small island in a very small country. And he ended up he successfully swam to shore, got out, and when they got him to the hospital, he exhibited no signs of hypothermia and was only a little bit dehydrated. And now what we should all know is that the rest of us would have perished within 20 to 30 minutes. I mean, the water is so cold. And he ended up 6 hours, 6 kilometers. That's about 3.7 miles, something like that. And he was able to do that because not only was he an excellent swimmer, it turned out his body fat is like a seal's. And so they called him the human seal. It's like 2 to 3 times normal human thickness, more dense. He was able to keep his core body temperature stable, and so that he could keep swimming. And they subsequently, he agreed to go, undergo these tests, research with these Icelandic and British researchers, and these studies were published in various medical journals. And actually my mother-in-law, who at the time was an OR nurse in Massachusetts, she remembers reading about his case, just about like what, things that we learned about the human body and hypothermia, and sort of like how, in the sort of like control group were these like hardy soldiers or military guys, and they were all just like, get me out of this water, and he's just biking along in this ice bath, and it's fine, he's just a little bored of doing it. And to me, this story is so, it is a story that captured the imagination of the world at the time. He was like hounded by journalists, and he was like Johnny Carson, Tonight Show, Johnny Carson chased him down, and he, it's a story that is mythological. It's like the Selkies, the half seal, half human characters from Icelandic and Scottish mythology. And it's like this epic survival story. It's about human endurance and resilience and all of the stuff that we can't get enough of. We as humans tell each other stories, and we also tell each other stories to communicate skills and information, and we pass down, that's sort of what makes us uniquely human, is that we're able to we don't just pass down traits genetically and evolutionarily in biologically, but we pass down information. We are a cultural species. We pass down bodies of information that individually one of us is not smart enough to learn all these things, to acquire all these bodies of knowledge in one lifetime, but we pass those skills down, and that has led to the success of our species on this planet. And perhaps like has worked too well, but swimming is one of those skills, and to me, all of the stories and all of the lore and all of the fascination around Gudliger Thorson speaks to that very human fascination, also with the water, also with the ocean, also with the fact that we as a species have to learn how to swim. We have to be taught. We can't swim from birth the way most terrestrial mammals can. And so it's just really, yeah, it just had it all, like you said.
Yes, and so again, going back to confidence, as I read that, first of all, this is one of the problems with being a reader in the modern world, is you stop halfway through the chapter and immediately go online and look this guy up and say, I want to know what he looks like
Right.
and that sort of thing. And as long as we keep reading, I guess we should take advantage of what modern technology offers us. But I thought she really started this book off fantastically. Now I want to see how she possibly follows it up, because no editor and no agent would say, you did great, and then the rest of it just kind of went downhill. So I knew there was going to be more, and in fact there was. But you yourself are an accomplished, enthusiastic, veteran, lifelong swimmer. So, and I found over the course of 17 of these episodes of our Read of the Day book club, and having interviewed so many authors in my life, to be privileged to do that, that a lot of writers, well, the last thing you or any other author wants me to do is ask the horrid, where do you get your idea question. So I'm not going to do that, because that is just anathema to anything you want. But one thing that did occur to me was, I wonder if Bonnie thought of this book while she was swimming. And I thought, no, that's almost just as lazy. So I wonder if you're also a surfer. So maybe you were surfing and thought, I should write a book about swimming. Or I don't know, you got kids, maybe you were watching them swim,
Mhm.
or maybe you were shopping. I don't know. Where did it occur to you
The grocery
to
store is
write a
my
book
ultimate
about swimming?
inspiration. Wandering the house. It's actually not, but I do like going to the grocery store. I haven't gone very much this year, but
No.
I'm going to back up and answer that question by saying that, with my previous book, American Chinatown, I knew that I wanted to write that book. It seemed obvious to me because my parents came through New York and San Francisco Chinatowns, and I found myself kind of returning to the topic in my magazine and newspaper stories. And so I thought, okay, there's something there. And also there's such a rich history, personal history, and also in this country, and all these themes. And I wanted to write about different generations in each of these 5 Chinatowns that I wrote about. And then after that book, people always ask, oh, what are you working on next? What do you think you're gonna write another book? And one thing I learned from writing the Chinatown book was, if you're gonna write a book, you had better be ready to spend years and years and years not only thinking about it, but writing about it and then talking about it for a long time. And I said to myself, like the first thing that actually popped in my mind and stayed there for a while was swimming. It just was there because it's just, and if you read the book, you'll understand, my parents met in a swimming pool in Hong Kong. Like, I grew up swimming from a young age, and did all of the things, swim team, taught swimming lessons, was a lifeguard, all of this, went from swim team to open water swimming and triathlons and all this stuff, and then took up surfing. And that's not a book, that's a topic, as we all know. And so what are the stories? And so when I started to observe my kids, really, I had my children my sons are now 8 and 10, and they're on the swim team. But when I first started thinking about, could I write a book about swimming? They were kind of learning to get comfortable in the water and loved it the way I did. And I think it was the right moment to write the book, because I was thinking about it on many levels, not just as a journalist and a lifelong swimmer, but as a parent who could see, as they were testing out their bravery and courage, around the water, and interest in it, and loving how it felt, and kind of experiencing this for the first time, that I could put myself back in the place where they were, as a young kid, like first experiencing the ocean and how amazing and magical that was, but also how dangerous it could be, and being scared and understanding that tension. And then as a parent watching them do that, like every time, they're by the where the shore break, you can really, it's so dangerous, in so many places. And you could be safe one minute and then like sucked out to sea the next. And that has happened actually here in the Bay Area along the coast many times this year. Kids, families, adults getting swept out to sea by these waves that just kind of sneak up on you. And so I think because all of these different thoughts were kind of knocking around my head at all of these different levels, and yet at the same time still like kind of collecting stories, coming across interesting research studies or little anecdotes, that I started to feel like maybe that I had a book, that there were interesting things that I could put together in a way that was compelling, as a narrative arc, from start to finish. And how to ask that, how to structure that book, starting with a question and then 5 different ways of answering that question, and filling those little buckets with stories that were that I found really interesting, and hope, and also lesser known stories, right? So like everyone knows about Michael Phelps. I don't really need to, he's written his own books. I don't really need to dive too much into his life, although I do, of course, have to mention him in the competition section. But also I was interested in his struggles with mental health, around competition, and also really, the stress of competition in swimming being something that no longer filled him with joy, and I think that because joy is such an integral part of my experience with the water, probing at all of those outlines, and again, trying to think of like different ways in than had already been done. And so that was how I kind of eventually came at it, both as a journalist, but also as a lifelong swimmer. And so hoping to bridge, the experience of someone who is just an extraordinary swimmer to the reader and say, I'm your guide. I'm going to tell you about these stories and these extraordinary people, but also I'm just the every person swimmer too. And this is, sort of how I feel about it, or what the sensory experience of it is like for me. So yeah, I think I wanted it to have lots of different, something for everyone. Of course, you can't really do that, but to have a range of experience, depths, again, to extend that metaphor even further, like just that you could experience, this book just like from a story perspective. I wanted it to be able to stand on its, its own that way, but also to, trigger the watery appeal, for people who maybe hadn't thought about it for a while, swimming in that way.
I think, and I hope I'm not doing you the injustice of oversimplifying, but if I was going to explain to a layperson, maybe with the formula of why we swim, it's like there's the physical aspect of it and the mental aspect of it and all that falls underneath that. And they combine, to me, in a way that is almost spiritual, if you want to say it that way, mystical, if you want to say it that way, therapeutic in a Zen sort of way.
Uh-huh.
And I think there was a period in my life where I swam a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able, quite without any help or knowledge there to learn about that mystical aspect when you combine the physical and the mental. And I got there, I wasn't any good, don't get me wrong with any of that. But it came to me that I was enjoying it on that level, and it was kind of a surprise. And I wondered how you would convey that to a person who has never swam or swum. Wait a minute, is swam or swum correct?
Had never swum before. I swam.
I don't know.
We had swum. think.
I
I'd
don't
never
know.
swum before.
I could swim 6 kilometers in 41-degree water easier than I could answer that grammar question. But so anyway, where I was rambling on with that is, you do convey how that works, because some people are kind of turned off by anything that suggests new age or whatever, a spiritual component. But I was wondering, was it hard to talk your agent into a book on swimming? Because if a layperson doesn't understand and hasn't been in the pool or the open water, swimming can be to some people like, I don't want to do that. And that's pretty much a period or an exclamation point. You know what I mean?
Right. Sure. I mean, I think because there are so many swimmers in the world, we kind of felt like we would be safe with our audience. And the thing is, you may not be a swimmer or call yourself a swimmer or know how to swim, but you've taken a bath, you've been in the shower, you understand the appeal of water, you go for walks on the beach, you hike by waterfalls, you go to the rivers, you follow these you follow the water. We all need it to survive. And beyond that, there is an appeal and a draw for it to us as a species. So one thing that I found so interesting, and I've talked about this before, when I was thinking about the book and researching it, and people would ask me, when I was kind of like waist deep in it, and I would tell them that I was working on a book about swimming, and people would just have they would have very strong responses, pro or con. I love swimming. Tell me more. I've had this experience. I've swum since I was little. I go every year to this lake. Da da da. They know. And then there's the subset of the population that's, oh my God, I'm so scared of the water. I hate getting, dunking my face in, et cetera, et cetera. This happened to me when I was X years old. I've always wanted, and then you kind of peel back layers, and then there comes the, I wish I were a stronger swimmer. I wish I wasn't scared. I would love, and it takes a lot of courage to unpack that. And then also, understand that was like actually traumatic, in a very real way. I mean, it is, because it is so life and death oriented, that there was this like very common undercurrent to the stories of no thanks, or I didn't think I was going to be interested. I'm not a swimmer. Like, all of those stories, there's something under there that is really psychological and experiential and is rooted in fear. And so that was something that actually I treated in the book as a main theme, because I saw that. And everyone understands fear. Everyone understands like trying to, figure out how to conquer that and face it, or not, or ignore it. And then it just kind of like, blacks out this whole experience in your life. But if you do have the time to think about it and probe at it, you understand that, it is all about this very primal instinct. And so that's how I got at that. And it is the greatest compliment to me when I get letters from people who say, I haven't swum in 20 years. I have not sought out the water. I read your book. I wasn't sure if I was going to like it, but now I have started I just signed up for a swim club. I just did this. I'm taking lessons. I'm planning this trip, to this place so that I can, work on my swimming. I started open water swimming in pandemic. Like, it is just this avalanche. I love hearing these stories, because that means I did my job. That was what I really wanted to do.
I think I remember, Bonnie, the first time I read The Perfect Storm, and I think probably everyone is familiar with that. I don't have to explain that. But there was a bizarre lunatic part of me that, not seriously, but you couldn't help but think it'd be sort of cool to be out on one of those boats in a hurricane with, of course, the the caveat that, yeah, we're going to come home or whatever.
Right.
Not in a million years would I really do that. If someone could snap their fingers and say, you're going to be in the middle of a fishing boat in a hurricane, I go, well, wait a minute, back up. I don't want to do that after all. But you're talking about fear and overcoming it and facing it. One of the great things about this book is not just some of the stories that you tell and the characters that you introduce us to, but all of a sudden we have Bonnie in San Francisco Bay climbing onto the beach and swimming all the way to Alcatraz, which is any sane person knows is insane. Don't do that. You got the currents, you've got the shipping lane, you got the sharks. It's almost as cold as that Iceland guy. But you did it. You put us in the water with it. And then the next thing I know, I'm going, I'd like to do that. But I know I never will. But the way you wrote about that, talking about other characters that introduced you to it, helped you along, pushed you to it, other people that have done incredible swimming feats. And one of them said, the water, I'm paraphrasing, correct me if I'm wrong, you're in the middle of one of these swims, these arduous swims or whatever, and you realize the water is saying, you don't belong here. You need to go home. I think that's kind of what you said. And that just sort of pushes you on a little more. But walk us briefly through that first swim to Alcatraz. And at any point, did you go, what the hell is wrong with me? And then at another point, did it kick in where you went, this is great?
Yes, absolutely. And it's so funny that you bring up that swim, because I can put myself in that on that day very easily. Like, the water was so cold. I was on that swim, I was wearing a wetsuit because it was before I tried swimming without a wetsuit in the bay. And I trained for it, but like when we got in the water, it was still like such a slap in the face. It was like ice cream headache all over the place. And I remember thinking, it just really takes your breath away. And one of the things that you have to, and I had trained for it, I had practice, I'd learned a lot of techniques and all the safety, all the safety things that you have to really know to do it. And still, I just, I remember, taking that first breath when I jumped in after I popped up, and just thinking, this is really like intense, and then looking around, and we had our like safety pilot boat there were 6 of us swimming, and then turning around and looking at the Golden Gate Bridge from the water, and just thinking, all right, let's do this, and then when I started swimming, you're swimming and you feel, you get into a rhythm and you feel really good, and then I remember hitting a patch of seaweed with my hand. And I don't know about you all, when you're out swimming in the ocean or a lake or anywhere where you hit something, you don't expect it, you can't see what it is. I just immediately, it's like it's a gut reaction. I just stopped and jerked up, and stomach dropped, and it was a patch of seaweed, but it was, again, like, it was not, my body was reacting way faster than my mind, and so that was like this elemental, instinctive, like, biological level thing happening, taking over. And so then I kept swimming, and then I just would stop and look around every once in a while, just to really understand, like, from the fisheye level, what it is to be in San Francisco and in San Francisco Bay, and looking at Alcatraz and looking at the Golden Gate Bridge and looking at the skyline and hearing, seeing cargo ships go by, hearing the seagulls, you can hear traffic, like you could hear, it's a totally different sensory experience. And like, just having that slight, like, if you could imagine the camera angle is not up here where the ridge is, you're down here now and you're looking up at it. That just was a sense memory, a sensory experience that I cannot get enough of, like, recalling, because it was the shift in perspective is so basic that it like kind of threw me for a loop. It's like when you get a little bit of vertigo from just not, it was a little bit like that, because it just reoriented me to my surroundings in a way that I had never understood. And that was so cool. So absolutely and then, when we cruised into the beach and like the current was really good, like, we had to go at slack tide. So in between the time when the water was rushing into the bay and then sucking back out. And it happens, the tide switch, the change happens really fast. And so you have to catch it. You start swimming towards San Francisco at this angle. And then by the time the tide changes, you have to start aiming that way, because otherwise you'll miss it and end up swimming a lot more than you wanted or intended to. And, again, knowing all of these little facts and tricks and keeping them in your mind, and at the same time trying to really be present. I mean, I think that holding all of those things at once is just, it's a really great exercise in, in just overcoming a lot of new things. And I just think, like, as a grown-up, you don't really push yourself to do that many things that are physically that challenging. I don't think most people do. And to have an opportunity to do that in a way that was accessible to me because I'm a swimmer, but also tons of people who aren't great swimmers can do it too. And my friend who convinced me to do it, he had only really seriously started training to swim like maybe the year before. He's like, I'm not a great swimmer. He's like, he took some lessons and was in the pool, and then said that he really wanted to do that swim. And he's a serious scuba diver now, but like, that's a different thing from open water swimming. And so when he said, if I could do it, you can definitely do it, it got me, I was still nervous about it, because it's, again, like swimming from Alcatraz, like escaping from Alcatraz, like it's such again, the story element, the myth, no one escapes because the currents and the sharks and the cold water and all that. It's cool. Like, and the writer in me is like, ooh, like looking up all these old newspaper stories and finding out all about the people who tried to make the attempt. And then also, since it closes a federal prison that, recreationally, that people like Jack LaLanne would swim from Alcatraz and, do all of these crazy feats. And that like a 16-year-old girl, like trained to swim, and she swam from, someone was in a rowboat with her. Like, this was like way back in the early 1900s. And I mean, that's cool.
Okay, in that context, and there's no competitive element to what I'm about to say, because obviously you are a very good swimmer, but in the course of researching and writing the book, you met, like the Icelandic fisherman, you met a woman who overcame great physical adversity and became one of very few people who swam the 7 most challenging open water swims in the world. You met a samurai swimming master in Japan. That part of the book, we don't have enough time to even go into how great that is and the physical discipline that's involved with that. You spent time with an Olympic swimmer who won a gold medal and a silver medal at the age of 41. I know people who played professional golf on the minor league tour, or double or triple A baseball players that never made the major leagues. They're incredible athletes. They are so good, but they weren't quite good enough to make it to that next level for whether mental reasons or, mental discipline or physical or whatever. And so you spent an entire book talking to people in that context. What is it like to be around? Do you get the whatever it is magical element that is in those folks that enables them to do that? And how did it help you comprehend and appreciate what you yourself have done? Because there's no insignificance to what you've done too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I, and I say this in the book, I am competitive as a person in some ways, right? But not in swimming, like not in, at least not anymore, not in sport. Like I just don't, I'm not motivated by competition the way like I used to be when I was a kid, like to race, right? Like that's, many people know that with kids, like you make it into a competition or a game and then they're suddenly like, yeah, I want to, it's very pure. It's like,
Right.
to be the first or to be the fastest or do the longest thing, or that kids can understand that and they like the idea of being that first, best, fastest, whatever. And I'm old enough to not care about it that much. At least with like something physical, because like I understand that I'm never going to be that anymore. And so for me, it's swimming itself has changed why I do it. And it's about the feeling of it, of swimming, a practice with my master's team, or just going to swim on my own to work, do a workout and let my mind wander around for like an hour while my body's moving. I know that I feel good, when I get out of the pool or I get out of the ocean or, go surfing or whatever. And so it's about noticing what allows me to kind of keep going, keep doing, keep living. I mean, that sounds again like very basic but and fundamental, but I think when you get to be a certain, you get to be a parent, and you're and a working parent, and then a working parent in pandemic, and then a homeschool teacher, and then all the, just like all of these things, all these stresses of like trying to keep everyone well and happy, and getting through this thing. Like I think, holy cow, like over the course of the year, I have thought about how swimming is, mental health. It's just like cleansing. It's like allowing me to focus on just like what's going on in my mind at that time, or just like observing what's in the world at that time, out in the open water. And that is the therapy or the therapeutic nature of it that I have been understanding is so essential in this year, right? So I could give, a rat's butt about how fast I am right now, because I am actually back. The pools are open around here again, and that's amazing. Like, and I did take it for granted that I could go every morning and see my crew in the locker room and all this stuff, and I will never do that again. And I worry about the larger community who hasn't been able to get in because it's so limited. The people who, like, for whom getting into a temperature controlled environment of all ages, all abilities, that you could do that safely. I mean, that's starting to happen, of course, with vaccinations and all that, but it's by no means a given. And
Yeah.
a lot of pools, and I talk about this in the book too, about access and equity, and when it comes to education, but also are pools available to you in your community? Are you able to learn to swim? Are the kids in the community able to do that? Like, that takes time, that takes money and resources. And I was lucky enough to have that when I was a kid. But, a lot of community pools have remained closed. And I remember last summer, reading about all these municipal pools that may never open again, talking to people who run these pools, saying like, even in the normal times that most municipal pools run at a deficit, right? So they are doing all these camps and lessons and swim team and, for the kids, and they take in all these program fees and they take in like the admission fees, but they still are running at a deficit, and it's like a public service, And then of course, like thinking about this time where they haven't been able to be open, they haven't been able to take in any revenue, and so like those places may disappear from those communities, and that sucks, but I think that that's like super essential to kind of keeping swimming as something that really, like, once you learn how to swim, swimming can be so much more than survival of like of the literal sort. It's all kinds of like health, wellness, well-being, teaching you how to like survive the world, really. And
yeah.
I don't know. I kind of, that answer kind of got away from me, but I think I just wanted to communicate that, like it's not a given. Swimming is not right, but I think it should be, because water is very equalizing. Once you know how to conduct yourself safely in it.
Um, this is the second time we've talked, Bonnie, and I just love it. I have enjoyed it so much, and
Thank you.
I hope Anastasia doesn't yell at me for I hope we don't cheat some of the viewers from questions. But Annie, if you want to come back, I apologize for holding Bonnie too long.
No, you are totally fine, and I'm really sorry. I have got like quite the sunbeam just right on into
angelic, positively angelic right there.
We know you're not a vampire.
Well, with that and the amount of garlic that I love to consume, there you have it. So before I dive in, I've got a couple questions that came to us before the event, and I just want to make an out loud reminder to our audience that if you want to ask a question, go ahead and submit it through the Q&A box or in the chat. I'll be watching there. Our audience has been a little quiet tonight, so I'm putting it on them that they need to submit some questions. But I will say, I'm so glad we got to hear about your Alcatraz swim, because my social media coordinator and I were talking about that today, and she was like, I wonder what that was like. That must have been so crazy. So thank you so much for sharing that experience.
Yeah, of course.
So speaking about experiences, and we talked a little bit in the pre-show about the other book that you have that's newly out. Could you tell, and the other book, and the name is escaping me right now, but it's about the first female Maverick surfer.
Oh,
correct?
You mean this one? Sarah and Big Wave?
Yes. Could you tell us a little bit about what the experience of writing a children's book coming off of two really incredible, adult nonfiction, what that experience was like?
Sure. So Sarah and the Big Wave just came out on Tuesday. What's today? Thursday, a couple days ago. And it's a nonfiction kids book about the first woman to surf Mavericks, which is this huge, massive wave here in Northern California off of Half Moon Bay. And I didn't realize, someone asked me, did you time your release to when the Mavericks Big Wave Surf Awards is going to happen? I said, no, but it's happening tonight. So just that, all these things are serendipitous sometimes, and it's wonderful to see that. But I wrote a story. So obviously I'm a surfer, and a couple of years ago I wrote a magazine story about big wave women surfers who are preparing for a season at Mavericks. And Mavericks is, for those of you who don't know, it's a wave that only breaks in very specific conditions in the winter, when there's huge storms from the Pacific, and they have to kind of come in, roll in, and then hit the reef, and then it kind of rears up, and it gets a very steep, beautifully shaped wave off the coast of Half Moon Bay. And I'm going to show you something really cool, which is, this is the Sophie Diao is the artist, and this is Half Moon Bay, and then the wave forms, when all the swells come off the ocean, and it can be 20, 30, 40, 50 feet faces. And this past winter was huge, and if you Google it, you'll see that there were epic rides being filmed by professional surfers who were coming in from all around the world. And just, talk about just hair raising. Anyway, so I wrote this story, and then a children's book editor, Kate Farrell, my wonderful Kate Farrell, my editor, she called me up and said, have you ever thought about writing kids books? And I said, yes, I have. And so I wrote this book, and about Sarah Gerhardt, who was the first woman to surf Mavericks, and Sophie Diao illustrated it, and it came out on Tuesday, and we had this wonderful event where Sophie was live drawing a conversation between me and the real Sarah Gerhardt.
Oh,
And
neat.
it was just magical. We had the kid, you know, we read the book to the kids, but it was really cool to have Sarah there to answer, you know, like the real life questions of like what it's like to, you know, surf this monster wave. And again, like, you know, talking about like how the details of how when you're dropping into a really big wave, you don't just fall, it kind of pulls you back up as the wave is growing, and you stand up on your board, you kind of get sucked backwards, and then you go down the face of the wave. And just like things like that, you would never know unless someone who is doing it would tell you that. And then to hear her talk about it, you know, echoing all of the things that she told me that I translated to this day, that she meets her first wave, was really wonderful. And, you know, of course for kids it's a different thing, you know, but kids are just like, oh, that's so cool. And then they'll also ask you all kinds of funny questions about your life and have nothing to do with the book, but then you kind of like, or they will say, you know, what's your favorite marine animal? What's your favorite color? How old are you? What do you like to eat? You know, all this stuff. And I think that's great, because I had 2 kids of my own, and I love how their minds kind of pinball all around like that too.
I love that. That's awesome. Okay, great. So we've got some audience questions that are rolling in now as well. So Carol wants to know, what is your reason? Why do you swim?
Oh gosh. Well, so the book is organized in 5 different thematic sections, again, of the ways we can answer that question. And I swim for all of those reasons. So survival, well-being, community, competition, and flow, all of those reasons. And over the course of my swimming life, each of those have taken, you know, higher priority than other reasons. But, you know, like I said before, in this last year, it's definitely been, you know, well-being, community. I miss my community because we couldn't really swim together that much, you know, as much as we were accustomed to, but we did swim together at a distance. And actually, you know, open water swimming is great for that. Surfing is great for that, to be able to in a pandemic, be outside together. So yeah, I mean, right now, those are the big reasons that I'm doing.
Absolutely. And you mentioned open water swimming, and that's perfect timing because our next question is about that. Franny wants to let you know how much they loved the book. And they are a swimmer, but on the pool side, they are interested in getting into open water swimming. Do you have any tips or tricks for people who might be a little intimidated by that?
Absolutely. So the first thing I always say is find a buddy who you trust and who actually kind of knows wherever it is that you're going to swim. So in this last year, a year ago, there's a little cove here called Keller Beach in the eastern side of San Francisco Bay that my friends, my master's swimming friends, they'd never swum in open water. They were always straight pool swimmers, but were desperate to get in the pool. Desperate to get in the water. And so we would lead swims from this little cove. And, you know, it always was so great to be out there together and to know that someone else was there with you, someone who knew kind of like, you know, the currents tend to do this, you know, at high tide or low tide, that, you know, when it's low tide, you see a lot of seaweed, but you can always walk out, you know, and stand up pretty much the whole way that you're swimming out to this particular post, or, you know, all of these things, this intel is just helps you feel much more comfortable. And then also go slow, like, especially if the water is cold and, you know, you adapt very quickly, like over the course of several swims, but it is really important to not push the cold, you know, tolerance thing too fast, because your body temperature will continue to drop even after you get out of the water. So you'll experience what's called after drop, and it's like you've left the water and you feel totally fine, and then it's not until afterwards when you're in the shower and you're not even in the cold anymore that you kind of start experiencing you know, mild hypothermia. And so that's something that I felt when I first started swimming without a wetsuit in San Francisco Bay. And you know, it's kind of freaky because you're like, I'm out already. I'm standing in the shower and the hot water is on me, and I'm like uncontrollably shaking. And just to be safe like that, to have like, you know, hot tea or something to like warm your insides up pretty quickly is kind of critical. So yeah, go slow, find a buddy, and have fun. Yeah, it's awesome. It's so great.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's it's inspiring to the point where I even feel like maybe I would consider doing that more beyond than just the jump into the ocean. So we have just a few minutes left, and I have 2 more questions, and we'll answer them quickly. Is there something that you found really compelling, a cool piece of research that didn't make it into the book that you like treasure?
Oh, you know, I wrote this chapter about swimsuit competitions. The history of swimsuit competitions. It just did not make it in there because it was not quite right with like everything else that went before, but I really did treasure it because it was about how the early swimsuit competitions, like, you know, all these Atlantic City bathing beauty contests were not about swimming.
Right.
It was just about, you know, the swimwear was incidental to everything else that was happening. And then it wasn't until, you know, evolution of like various swimsuits, and then you got Speedo and this like ultra high-tech suit that was like eventually banned, you know, like, and then imitated by all other companies. Like it was just like so interesting to see that arc.
Yeah.
And then of course like the discussions of gender and sexuality, and also like ability and power and swimming. It was fun, but perhaps another time we'll talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it sounds like the book is really intersectional, which is so cool.
Yeah.
So I always like to end, and I'm sure you're probably tired of this question, but everyone always wants to know, what is next? What are you working on down the pike that everyone can be excited to look for in the future from you?
Well, you know, this kids book is so new that I'm just going to point at it because I really love it.
Gotta ride that wave.
So, ride that wave. I want to, you know, one of the things I learned, of course, from swimming and surfing is to like really enjoy the time that you're in the water. And so I'm trying to do that. I do have some things that are coming, you know, that I'm working on, but right now I just want to enjoy the water, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's incredible. And again, well, gotta hold it over here. Fancy me, you can see the book. You can order a copy of Why We Swim via our website or the links that I dropped in the chat, or just come in and see us. You know, the bookstores are open. Just come in, wear a mask, socially distance, and we'd love to see you. Bonnie, thank you so much. What a fascinating, I was completely engrossed in your and Rick's conversation. So it was great to sort of be in the audience. So thank you so much for joining us. This has been awesome. And Rick, thank you always for your fabulous interviewing skills.
Rick, I'm going to vote for the hair. I don't know what you look like normally with short hair, but I like the hair.
Oh, wow.
FYI.
Thanks. I thank you. Doesn't look so good when I'm swimming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night.
You too.
Bye.